Okay, so hopefully you can hear us, and this is a little bit better of a feel than the cold table. So as I said, Laurie Clarke and Hal Stowe from TSG Consulting. So very happy to have you here. And I do believe we have some members of industry still in the house. Hopefully some more will trickle in, or we'll just let them view this on the recording. But I know that we've had a lot of engagement from industry during this meeting, and they always have questions from the regulatory perspective. And we had an FDA town hall earlier this week and got some answers, but we know that the consultants can give us a little bit more in-depth answers perhaps than the FDA can on some of these things. So anyway, so I'll just maybe first ask both of you to just open with remarks about kind of your business, the types of clients you work with, and any opening remarks you want to make, and then we'll dive into some of these questions.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Jessica said, I'm Laurie Clarke, and Hal and I work for TSG Consulting. We are a US-based consulting firm that's part of a larger UK company. The UK company has a device product development team, and Hal and I serve as in-house FDA regulatory consultants for the device product development team. We're also direct FDA consultants. We provide FDA regulatory advice to companies directly. We do the whole range of FDA regulatory services on the device side. We focus primarily on the pre-market submission side, but we do the entire life cycle. So we work with pre-submissions, IDEs, 510Ks, de novos, PMAs, and we represent the whole range of company sizes from startups to multinational corporations, and we do the whole gamut of devices, including focused ultrasound systems and just about any type of device you can think of. Hal?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we're a very flexible team, and sort of being a support system for startups as well as large, sort of institutional companies does allow us to be a backboard, and you can call us and we will give you advice, or we can really be part of a team and learn and grow and scale your company with you. So it's a very flexible environment, and it's a lot of fun, and it allows us to engage with small sort of disruptive companies and technologies and sort of feel out their regulatory strategy and the best pathway for them.
Great, and there are a lot of small disruptive companies in our field, so that's great. So I guess if we just start with, if you all could discuss the different pathways when you're approaching the FDA, the different pathways that one can use, and how these might relate to focused ultrasound technology, and this could be for devices only or for device-led combination products.
Sure. I think we'll focus on the three primary routes to market for devices in general, and I'll start off with that, and Hal, you can jump in with some examples after. As many of you probably know, the three primary routes to market for medical devices are the 510K pre-market notification route, in which you demonstrate substantial equivalence to a legally marketed device, a predicate that's on the market. About 10% of 510Ks in general include clinical data. As Hal will probably get into more detail, focused ultrasound devices have included clinical data in all of their pre-market submissions, including 510Ks for products that are within the same product code. I would like to say that's sort of the vast majority of devices go through the 510K pre-market route. The other end of the spectrum is the pre-market approval route, which is the big submissions for novel, higher risk devices that people often think about when they think of devices, and think about them and read about them in the newspaper. And that's multi-volume, extensive clinical testing, extensive bench testing, often animal testing of the device, very detailed description, having pre-approval inspections of the medical facility, the manufacturing facility, often inspections of the clinical study sites. It frequently goes to an FDA advisory panel that reviews the data and makes an approval or not approvable recommendation to the agency, which they can accept or not accept. Massive submissions, long review periods to go through. And the middle category is the de novo route, and I kind of like to think of it as sort of the baby bear, the smaller chair, the papa bear and the mama bear chair, that when one chair is too small and the other chair is too big, this is sort of the next step. It's not the route that is the primary route. It's sort of when either of the other two don't fit. And it's for novel, meaning there's no other device like that, low to moderate risk device. They're generally, in terms of submission size, somewhere between a 510K and a PMA. They almost always include clinical data, but there's no comparison to a predicate. You evaluate the device on its own based on its data. And those all apply to both devices and device combination products. And Hal, why don't you give them some examples?
Absolutely. So let's go first to what's probably the most applicable. I'm trying to think, should we go to first? Let's start with prostate ablation. So the sort of, in the pre-market first category, you know, as she said, we're still talking trial data. That is not going to go anywhere. But sort of an interesting trend we've seen with the first clearance being somewhere in 2015 and the most recent being, I think, last year in 2021. And this is product code PLP for the few of you who might know that. We've seen an interesting trend in sort of the switching of the indication. So, or switching is a bad word here, but it's sort of a transition of the indication where equivalence is being pursued and granted, but the first clearance was transrectal, and now it's transurethral. So it's been a very interesting switch from the agency of, you know, we're allowing a technological difference, but still going to grant you substantial equivalence. So I think that's been an interesting trend for us, is when we love to argue. I am not an attorney, but my colleague here is, but I still do love to argue. And it's trying to make the argument.
And he can hold his weight against you.
That just because the technology and sort of how it interacts with the patient is different, it is still equivalent. So that's sort of where companies engage with us, and they think this is a red flag, and they see sort of, okay, this is a technological difference, or there's something here that may raise the concern of the agency. Well, no, we'll make a very interesting argument, and we'll make a scientifically sound argument, and we'll do the best we can to make sure that the agency doesn't see any sort of large-scale discrepancies. So I think that's sort of an interesting trend in that regulatory pathway.
Great. So, you know, it's kind of interesting as you discuss that pathway, because before those devices were approved, everything that was approved through the FDA for focused ultrasound went through a full PMA, and then those prostate devices, I think the first was like a de novo, and then 510K after that. So I'm wondering where you see focused ultrasound now, and I guess I would say focused ultrasound ablation, because some of the other mechanisms are still very early stage, and they're gonna, at this point, definitely require the PMA. But do you see a shifting of focused ultrasound ablation applications to more 510Ks, or do you for newer indications, or do you still see the FDA requiring these to be PMAs as we're going on?
Do you want me to start? I think it really depends on the indication. The cancer indications, those are still in the PMA category, which is consistent with how FDA regulates other devices for cancer treatment. As you pointed out, the first focused ultrasound devices were PMA devices. The ones that have gone through the de novo route have generally, the de novo, of course, is the first one through there, then becomes the predicate for potential other devices in that category and creates the category. So the ones that have started in de novo are now 510K. And as Hal pointed out, prostate is one of the classic examples, but it's prostate tissue. It's, you can't be, it's neither specific to benign prostatic hyperplasia or prostate cancer. So a lot of times in these categories, it's determining what indication and thinking about what you need to go to market and what the regulatory implications of that are. Can you go with an indication that will get you clinical data, probably a smaller study, and go through a 510K route, or to have a marketable product you need or want to go to an indication that may put you in a PMA category, or be the first of its kind and be in the de novo category possibly, and then become a potential predicate for others to follow.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything to add?
No, I think that was a fantastic explanation.
I pay him to say that.
So then, obviously, you mentioned that the cancer applications are going to be PMA, and that's consistent with how the FDA views other cancer applications. Are there indications where you think that perhaps focused ultrasound ablation could enter the de novo route and with one device and then go the 510K, kind of like the prostate? I mean, other applications, there's obviously a lot of neuro applications. Could we see that happen there eventually, or not? Or moving forward, applications, maybe where we have things coming, several companies maybe developing devices for pain, for instance. Do you see that could be something down the road where maybe we could follow the de novo and then 510K pathway? I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, I think, and I'm going to step aside for an answer part of your question and then come back to the main part of that question. Once a device is put into a class 3 category, it stays in class 3, and any other devices of that type for those indications would require a PMA unless the device is down classified to class 2 or class that usually typically requires 510K, though there's some that are 510K exempt, or class 1, 510K, very few of them, or most of which are 510K exempt. That can be either done by industry requesting it or by FDA making a determination, but a class 3 device can't be a predicate. So once you've gotten, for example, let's see, breast cancer was one of them. If it's into that PMA category, the next one has to be a PMA category unless it's down classified. But for new indications, yes, there are indications that certainly are candidates for the de novo route, but they have to meet the criteria. It has to be novel, and it's the first, they meet that criteria, but it has to be low to moderate risk. And FDA is generally reluctant to think of something that's treating cancer as low to moderate risk. Even if the device itself is low to moderate risk, it's the risk of missing cancer cells and the cancer continuing and bad outcomes. So most of those will be in a high-risk PMA category. But there are other indications that certainly, I mean, this technology, as I'm preaching to the choir here, understand has lots of potential applications. So there's certainly other applications that are at least potentially de novo. It's more of a challenge to start with a 510K for a new indication, claiming substantial equivalence to a different type of technology. I think that's a harder battle to fight than to get into the de novo category.
Okay. Well, at least I think for our community, if they come talk to you, then perhaps those discussions can happen early on about if they're in a totally different, if they're non-cancer and they're in some other indication where potentially there is that low risk, maybe they can consider the de novo pathway.
Sure, and does it help for us, Hal and I talk about sort of how we look at that and make that. Do you want to start? Or?
No.
You know, so you come to us, you have your device, and you tell us about your technology and your proposed indication. And the first thing we do is, you know, research. And then research being the regulatory research on, is there a predicate? Is there a classification, regulation, or product code that applies to it? So has the FDA already specified what the route to market for this type of product is? If it has, do we, you know, for what you're proposing, perfectly fit in there? Is there an argument we can make for a different route? Or is there some modification we can make either to the technology or to the indications that may move it into a lower category if that's what you want? And hard to believe, but occasionally we have clients that come to us that say they want to be in a PMA category because of the benefits. You don't become a predicate for other devices. The next device has to do extensive clinical testing, go through the whole PMA approval process too. But most companies come to us, especially startups, and want to go to the lowest route possible. And we look to see what we can find and then what arguments we can make working with you and considering what are your objectives and what's important. If it's getting to market as soon as possible, you may be willing to take less of an indication to get there first, and if not, or you might want to have the most marketable indication first, even if it means a more extensive clinical testing and a longer regulatory path.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, a lot of what we do is sort of a cost-benefit analysis with a lot of the people that come to us, and so we work a lot with startups, and a lot of that discussion is, okay, here is your sort of end goal indication. And also, you know, with what we can work with now, do we take a stepwise approach? So is it, do we sort of, as she said, do we go with sort of the lowest, like the most accessible indication first and then build upon that indication through, you know, 3 or however many rounds it takes, sort of to get you to that end goal, but also give you a product that you can put on the market and, you know, get the revenue so you can continue to build and develop and scale. And so that's always sort of an interesting discussion with, obviously, especially startups who have the end goal, but need it to be torn apart into more bite-sized pieces, just so, you know, there's typically small staff, and they need to do they need to reach out to a bank or a VC, or, you know, how can they sort of tie the commercialization and into the regulatory in smaller chunks to get that end goal without sort of getting lost in the regulatory process. So if you do ever come and engage us, you know, that's sort of the first thing we will look at is what's your end goal, where are we now, and sort of what is the most direct path there.
Okay. You know, I think as we know the FDA, there's always things changing. It seems like lately, particularly with NCDRH, there are new programs that pop up that potentially can be helpful, maybe not, who knows. But I wonder if you could comment on any changes or new programs that you think, you know, the community should know about. I mean, I know we hear a lot about the breakthrough device designation, the newer program, the Safer Technologies STEP program. If you comment on some of these or others as well.
Sure. Well, secret, and you know, the breakthrough, FDA issued the final guidance in 2018, and I've been doing FDA regulatory. I started off in practicing FDA law, and then started doing FDA regulatory consultant for 32 years. So something that's 5 years old seems new to me. For Hal, that's half his lifetime ago almost. So, but I think of it as still a new program, though it's now becoming more of an established program. It's a very good program. I think most companies, if they're eligible for designation, want to get it and are very happy when they get it. It's a rigorous program. It has very established criteria. It's based on you have to be more effective. You have to, you know, be either a new technology, an improvement over the existing technology, and you have to apply to FDA for the breakthrough designation. You have to obtain it, and then you get the reward of it is that you get more access. FDA devotes more resources to you. There's different types of submissions that are available to you. Not pre-market submissions, but way of getting feedback from FDA. There's a standard pre-submission that's available to all devices when you put together a description of your product, your regulatory history, the testing you've done, often finding out what type, giving a clinical study protocol, for example, and getting FDA's feedback, and you go to them with a list of questions, and FDA tries to schedule a meeting on now. Video conferencing in 60 days, gives you feedback in 75 days, available to virtually every device. That's available if you get the breakthrough. But the exciting parts are the other options. The sprint reviews where you set up, schedule your objective, and it's usually like one issue to FDA, and you agree on a time frame from getting back and how you're going to do it, and it's much more interactive. And FDA, once you submit your information to them, tries to get back to you if there's additional questions in 30 days, and then 60 days, answer your questions. There's also the data development plan, so you can go into, as a breakthrough device, do a Q-sub to pre-submission, certain type of pre-submission to FDA, and you explain how you intend to basically demonstrate the product, if it's a 510K, a substantial equivalent, if it's a de novo, that it meets the criteria of reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness and PMA. They encourage you to lay out your preclinical, your bench, and your animal testing, as well as your clinical testing, and you get FDA's feedback. Same type of review times and question times from them. Both of these types don't require acceptance reviews, unlike pre-market submissions. And, Hal and I will tell you, we recently did a 510K that had, we went through the checklist, and it's always one of those last minute things that you're making sure every component is in there. And we were very lucky, fortunate that we didn't get a refuse to accept because it was missing some elements, but that's often the case. And it's often not even so much that it's missing an element, even though you told FDA exactly in your version of the checklist where this information is in the submission, they can't find it, they don't see it as what they were looking for. That's avoided with the breakthroughs because you don't go through a refuse to accept checklist. And then there's another option is with your clinical study, you can have an agreement option with it. So you submit your clinical study plan to FDA and you agree. This is what you're going to do, and if the data comes out this way, you're going to get your clearance granted de novo approval, with the caveat that FDA reserves the right of, like, there's some, not that, that they're going to go back on what they said, but if there's some new scientific information or some reason to reconsider it, and they'll explain it in writing, go back. The goal is not to do that. The goal is to live by the advice they give unless there's some scientifically valid reason from stepping back from it. So the people always ask, is it quicker to get breakthrough designation? And the answer is no, generally, compared to other devices going through it, but it is quicker than if you didn't get the breakthrough. And it's not only just, and again, that's hard to show because you don't have, your two comparison in there, but it's because you get better feedback, you get earlier feedback, you get more feedback from FDA, that you don't have the risk of going down part of a path and making mistakes or having confusion with FDA. So it's going to take longer in general because these are novel, they're breakthrough devices. They're not the same as everything else. But because you're in this program, the process for that device becomes shorter.
So when is it best to apply for the breakthrough designation? Do you need to have some clinical evidence already, or can you apply really early on in your process?
You have to apply before you submit your pre-market submission. Mm-hmm. So before your 510K, your de novo, or your PMA. the answer I always tell companies is, it's when you can demonstrate that you meet all of the criteria. And if you can do it with less than clinical data or clinical data from a small study, that's great. The earlier you get it, the better it is for the company, because you have the interactive, FDA devoting their resources to it through more of the development period. But sometimes you need the data to demonstrate that it's going to be, because it's a reasonable assurance, assurance if it's going to be effective. You don't have to be showing it's effective or more effective than other products to get it, but you have to give FDA something other than we know it's going to be more effective in there. It's not unheard of for companies to be rejected the first time they apply for breakthrough designation and apply again. Because getting at any point through the development and process is better than not having it. And again, you have up till you submit it to actually get it.
Great. My clock here doesn't work, so somebody's going to have to tell me when it's going to be time for us to wrap up, just so I'm going to ask somebody else to do that. But so I guess what might be good is just for you all to tell the companies what's the best advice you can give on how to work with you all, the particular timing of getting a regulatory consultant, at what point in your process or their process.
This is the fun question. I'll take this. So again, typically it depends. Startups, we wholly encourage you to come and engage with us, sort of as soon as you can, as soon as what makes sense for your business and sort of your trajectory. We can hopefully help guide you throughout the regulatory strategy arc and process. It is always easier from our perspective to be proactive than to backpedal and sort of fight against the opinion of the agency or comments from the agency. So it's Q-subs, it's going through whatever mass amount of strategy, it's changing strategy, it's being nimble, and that's what we have found out for startups. And then, for the larger companies, typically we're engaged when there's a problem. As oh gosh, let's get some external help. So when to engage us totally just depends on where you are in the process and sort of what do you have as far as test data and sort of what's your commercialization timeline. And then as far as when you engage us, sort of our go-to strategy for them is be truthful and be honest. We can only help companies with what we know. We've all made mistakes. We can help you clarify those mistakes as best as we can. So be early and I guess be honest, and we will help you and we'll get you there.
Great.
And just to follow up on what Hal said, my advice to companies and when you engage a regulatory consultant is different than when you go to FDA. As Hal said, it's sort of come to us early, come to us often. It's better to hear your initial thoughts on what the product is, even if you don't have testing, because we can kind of help focus you in the right direction or what we think is the right direction, what will make your regulatory path easier if that's what you're looking for. And we realize that devices evolve, and so what you come to us the first conversation may not be what you come to us about the second conversation. It may have different components. You may have a totally different indication, a different patient population, and then we can readjust. So hearing it as it changes, we understand sort of how it evolves, and we can put that into context when it's our turn to help you tell that story to FDA. And coming to us early is different than what I tell companies about going to FDA. One of the biggest mistakes startups often go is to go to FDA really early in the process before they have the device design pretty much down pat, have enough data, because FDA will always remember what you told them at that thing. And if, 2 months, 6 months later, you've taken out a feature or added a feature or changed your indication, they'll constantly ask you, well, what about what you told us at your first meeting? So a part of what we do and how we help our clients is helping you decide when you have enough to go to FDA, but you still need enough input from FDA to help determine your path, determining the testing you can do. So it's kind of that sweet spot of when to go.
That's really helpful, because I think oftentimes people are told to go to FDA really early, and maybe it's too early. Yeah.
Well, Hal and I are smiling because, as we said, we are in-house with our product development team. And when we talk, the product development team and us, we almost have a fist fight, because they're like early, because it costs us a whole lot to make changes later, so we want to get FDA's feedback, and we're like, no, we want to have it sort of somewhat in place, and you want to have some data. So we're using our FDA regulatory consultant hats when we're saying this.
Well, this is great. Okay, so now we are definitely at time, and I want to thank everyone for hanging out. I want to thank you guys, and I know that we can easily get folks in touch with you. If there's any kind of email or something you just want to say out right now, you can, but otherwise we can just put people in touch with you if they're interested.
Our email addresses are easy. It's our first name dot last name at tsgconsulting.com. So hal.stowe at tsgconsulting.com, all one word, and laurie.clarke at tsgconsulting.com. And we do, we learn by hearing your experiences too, because, we take clients, we help them with submissions, but there's a broader range and other ones we don't. So we encourage you to shoot us an email, call us. We always love to, we're talkers, we always love to talk to you. And our experience is people like to talk their own invention, so please do reach out to us.
Well, thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. I'll just sit here to do our concluding remarks. So this is it for the program for today. And thank you all for joining us and sticking around. We have another networking reception. If you guys want to stick around at the networking reception, hopefully some folks will come talk to you. That's for the next hour. And then if you're joining online, we encourage you to interact with other participants on the symposium platform. We'll see you tomorrow for our final day of this year's symposium. We'll begin at 8 a.m. with special lectures on focused ultrasound for thyroid and diabetes. And again, if you're staying on site and need to take your car out for any reason, don't forget to pick up a ticket from the registration desk for complimentary parking in the garage, you guys as well. So anyway, thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow.